Thank you for coming today. I'm really happy to have you here. I'm Marilynn Mendell. I have a consulting business in Washington, D.C. area, and I also am an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. And I teach business development and marketing and public relations and change management. For me, they're all under one umbrella. So business development is a kind of nice professional way of saying selling. And so before I go into the slides today, I want you to think about two things. One, business development is selling, and the other thing is there are three parts to it. The beginning, which is ethics, and the end, which is appreciation, and then anything in between is really about how to do things. So those three things. So we'll start. I'm sure that you've all read the course description and you've seen the takeaways. These are the basic things that we're going to learn. This slide is a slide like all the rest of the slides that you're going to hear about and see today. And they're really not unusual. They're not unique. It's not something that you've never heard before. You will hear everything that I've said today, I bet, at least once in your life. The point here is that you have to use the things that I'm going to be telling you today. So the first thing is 99% of your work comes from work that you've had before or other clients. One of the things that you have to learn how to do is actually call people and talk to them and find out if they have work. The basics of ethics, for me, is about honesty and integrity. But it's also about a balance. It's about humility. It's about courage, but not something where you're like out there being crazy brave. Because in business development and growing a business, you have to take risks. And that takes somebody with courage. You have to be humble. People don't like arrogant people. So balance is the main thing. But honesty is, without question, the number one part of doing business. The Tylenol story is a story about crisis management. It's how, when you do something wrong, you have to make it right immediately. What I've discovered is that a lot of people shy away from admitting that they're wrong. In medical school now, they have done research where they've shown that if physicians, who occasionally make mistakes, I'm sure none of you ever do, but physicians do, that 50% of the people, if they just get apologies, will not sue. So there is, again, this element of being humble associated with that apology and doing the right thing. If you just say right away, okay, we made a mistake, we're going to make it right, we're going to do everything we can to make it right, I guarantee you that that's going to be a lot less than a lawsuit. Most of you are here because you want to learn how to do business development. I know I'm not allowed to use the word learn, but I'm going to say learn a few times. Inside of business development, you have to be brave. Introverts think that to be brave means you have to be an extrovert. You have to be a used car salesman. But you don't have to be a used car salesman. There's also research out there that shows that introverts are much better salespeople than extroverts because they're more believable, because they're shy, and they don't push. So that's what I'm talking about here. When you're doing business development, you need a plan. When I go into companies, I find that most people do not have a plan. When you're doing a plan, I'm going to take a coffee break here. You have to consider the worst case scenario. A black swan scenario is like if there was a 500-year flood on the Potomac. We recently had something like that, and the developers didn't put the elevators up. They didn't put the guards against the water up. Some of you have heard of the Hurricane Sandy. That's another example of a black swan. When you're putting your plans together, you have to consider the worst-case scenario. There are many books out there that are called futurist books. That's not science fiction. That's about what could happen. And there are probably a lot of you out there that say, well, but, you know, I've read those books, and they get it wrong a lot. They hardly ever get it right. We'll talk a little bit later about the cup half full and the cup half empty and positive attitude. But if you had read The Experience Economy or The Art of the Long View or some of those books 10 years ago, you'd be way out in front of people as far as how you did your buildings or how you do your designs. They get it right enough of the time that it will really help you in your business. So don't take down the names of these books from the slide right now. All these things are available through the AIA. You can go to my website later. Just think about the fact that futurist books should be part of what you are considering. Now, I want you to take a break here for just a second, and I want you to think about your hobbies. Now, I'm going to ask some people in the audience here to consider what their hobbies are. One of the people in the audience today is a young lady. We might have to get a close-up of her. And her name is Rosie. So I'm going to ask Rosie a few questions today. But before I ask Rosie any questions, I'm going to ask Grant back there a question. Grant, what's your hobby?
Music.
Music, okay. Mark, what's your hobby?
Model rockets.
Model rockets, very cool. Rosie, what's your hobby? I like to play with Ginny dolls. Is that like, really? Okay. What's your hobby? I like to fish. I want you all to think about your own hobbies. And you're probably watching this by yourselves. So I want you to think about that, and we'll come back to it later. This slide that we're looking at right now is a slide about marketing. And what it really means is there's a whole bunch of people that are fighting a battle on one side of the wall and a whole bunch of them on the inside. They've been battling for days. And the guys on the outside are starving to death. They've used up all their ammunition. They're dying. Guys on the inside are in the same place. But the king on the inside says, hey, we've got a goat left. Let's throw him over the wall. And the people say, are you crazy? That's the last of our food. I'm going to do it anyway. So he does. Throws it over. The guys on the outside say, oh my God, they've got so much food in there, we're going to starve to death out here and they'll beat us anyway. Let's go home. That story should stick in your brain from now on about when to do marketing and when not to do marketing. Always do marketing. There's never a time to not do marketing, because when the Great Recession is over, the people that have been doing marketing all along are still going to be in business. The other part to that is that's the first thing that people usually give up. When there's a recession, let's cut the overhead. Let's get rid of those guys. No, you don't want to do that. You've got to leave part of your budget. So we were talking before about the plan. You've got the scenario with the black swan that you thought about. Now we're talking about a marketing plan that always has to be there no matter what. Inside of plans that people do, what? Well, I don't have to do a plan. What do you mean you don't have to do a plan? Of course you have to do a plan. No, I don't. Why? Well, it's a waste of time. I don't have time. I'm busy. I work all the time. Rosie, Everybody has to do plans. All right, we're going to ignore her for right now. There are all sorts of plans that you have to do. You have to do proposals. Most people respond to proposals, but do you do Excel charts? I'm the queen of Excel charts. Inside of a proposal in an Excel chart, did you send a thank you note if you didn't get the job? Did you send a thank you note if you did get the job? Who went to that interview? You begin to add these things up, and after a while, you get to see patterns inside of them. It's hard in the beginning. I know better than anybody. I've been in this racket for a bazillion years. I'm an old person. And it's hard to set these Excel documents up, but once you've set them up, then they're easier to keep going. So when you do a budget, when you join committees, you want to track absolutely everything. In the end, that's going to give you an opportunity to see what you've missed, who isn't going to the interviews properly, whether or not you've joined the right organizations and given them the right amount of money, and if you're on target for what you want to do. This is a one-page plan that an architect, an international architecture firm uses. And when there was a Great Recession and they saw that this was coming, they took a look at different places where they could get work. Inside of that, they determined that they could get work in these two countries, China and India. And if they just got a tiny portion of that, they would be well. They would be fine. I tell this to people because you have to find something that you can do throughout that's going to give you a peace of mind so that you can sleep at night. Before I had this business, I was the largest and best off-premise caterer in Western New York with 200 people. I had to feed a lot of mouths, in other words. So I had to find businesses that would keep me in business, the type of work that would keep me in business. I figured out people die, they get married, they have birthdays, things like that. So it wasn't always the most fun work to play with mothers of the brides, but I did it because I needed that baseline of work. When you're doing a plan for your business and business development, you've got to find that one place that's going to keep you if things go bad or not. And that has to be written down. If you don't write a plan down, it's not going to work. I told you I don't have time. Oh, you're not going to interrupt me the whole time, are you? Right? Okay, well, we'll just ignore you. Broken record. I got a chance to use this the other day. It has to do with negotiating. I got into Denver. It was late. The plane had been delayed. I get to the hotel, and they tell me that they've overbooked and they don't have a room for me, even though I booked my room last October. So they say, I can put you in another hotel one night. No, and then we'll move you over here. No, I like to stay in one hotel every night. I'm sure you have a room for me. Nope, we don't have any rooms for you. I need to be in one hotel every night. So they came back. And the end of the story is they finally put me in the Magnolia Hotel all 4 nights. The first night they paid for it. And they gave me $100 cash to go away and not bother them. And then I asked for my Marriott points. Whenever you're in a negotiating system or place, you don't want to have people distract you with various things. You have to stay on point. And that's what the broken record is about. And I challenge you to try it. It actually really, really works. Again, don't write these books down. They're everywhere. Part of the reason that what I do is helpful for people like yourselves who are sitting in your offices in your bunny slippers is because anybody can change how they dress, how they speak, how they behave. Business etiquette is about all of those things, and there are things that you can learn. I like to tell people that the minute they leave their home to the minute that they return to their home, they're going to be on. So that means that somebody's watching you all the time. Now, I usually give out a placemat. Most of people that are doing business development have to go out and eat. I have yet to meet anybody in business development that didn't go to an event or some sort of cocktail party or some sort of dinner. When you're sitting across from a group of 10 people or 8 people, the first thing you do, usually in a large event, is there's a color guard that comes in, right? Most people are talking. Don't talk. Don't talk through the color guard. Don't talk through the national anthem. Don't talk through the prayer. People are watching everything that you do at these events. So don't talk during those. Then when you sit down at the table, introduce yourself to everybody. Now, a few minutes ago, I asked Grant and Mark what their hobbies were. And me. Ask people what their hobbies are. You will usually not remember their names, but you'll remember their hobbies. So I've got a rocket builder back there, and I've got a musician back there. And I like Jenny dolls. I know. So what do you do with that information? When you're at the table, you find out all this information, you go back and you put it in a database that is a central database that's integrated with your whole firm. One of the things that I find when I'm teaching other clients is that they say they have an integrated system in their office, but they don't. They're all on Outlook. You don't want to just be individual. You have to be connected. If you're going to really do business development in a company, it has to be collaborative. You have to play nice with each other and share information. So you introduce yourselves. You keep track of everybody's hobby. You keep track of their interests. You build a dossier before you even go to these events, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The biggest thing, okay, guys, I know I'm going to talk about the ladies a little bit in a few minutes, but the guys, this is what guys do. They take a big giant roll, and they take a big bite out of the whole roll. Or sometimes they cut the roll in half and they put a little butter on the inside and then they eat it like a sandwich. That's not okay. Okay? It's a little tiny bite of bread. You put a little butter on it. You put it in your mouth like that. You see that eclair? If you don't have a fork, that does not give you permission to pick up the whole eclair and start eating it. You are allowed to ask for a fork, believe it or not. So some of the things on this plate are things that you don't want to eat if you don't have to eat them. Here, this is about the girls. Yeah. No flip-flops. When you leave the house, you don't wear flip-flops. Not a big, giant convention here. This isn't a family vacation out in the woods. This is a business opportunity for all of you. You should be, I hope you get a full thing. You should be in business attire. This is how you go to a convention. Maybe not with as much jewelry if you're a guy, but you should be in business attire. You never know. You never know. You could be in the grocery store and get business. Remember what I said earlier? Business can come from anywhere. And that brings me back to memberships and organizations. Don't join the organizations. I want you to be members of the AIA, and I want you to join other organizations. If you're looking for foundations that you want to work with, then join an association organization. If you want to work with plumbers, then join the Plumber Association. And business development is not just going to events and drinking a bunch of wine and going home. Business development, your goal is to be at the top. Your goal is to become somebody on the board of that organization. That's where the business actually takes place, at the board level. So, you have to track. Normally I give this postcard out to everybody in the audience, but you get to look at it here on the screen whenever you want. Really? What does it say? Does it say anything interesting? Yeah, it does. You know, when you go to events, you put your name tag over here on the right. There's a reason for that. It's because most people are right-handed. So you want them to be able to look that way. The rest of the items on here are, I swear, things people have told you. Polish your shoes, don't drink alcohol when you're at an event, learn about people's sporting activities or their hobbies. You've heard all of this before. I keep a tracking book that's separate from the database for important people in the industry that I would like to know. I say that there should be about 10 different people that you're tracking at any given time that you want to have work from. 10, that's my number. You can pick any number that you want. There's no law here. And I track all of the projects that they do. I track about their interest, and I keep a picture of them. And before I go to an event or before any of my clients go to events, I show them the book and I say, look for these people. These are the people that you're going to try to contact. And this is what they do. So before you go to an event, be sure that you know who you're looking to speak to at the event, because you really don't want to be talking to the banker all night long if you're not looking for banking experience. And then let's talk about that. 3-minute rule. You have to be just as polite. You know how you're always at these events and people are like clinging to you for the whole time? I'll tell you how to change that. But you have to be just as polite. You say back to somebody, look, I'm sure you've got other people you have to see. I'll talk to you later. I'll give you a call. Well, they might say, gee, you're really interesting. I'd like to keep talking to you. But you have to see 3 people there. So you introduce that person to the person that's right next to you, even if you don't know who that person is. It doesn't matter. Just get them interested in somebody else, and then you can excuse yourself gracefully. The elevator pitch is not the thing that you normally think about. It's not about, this is what my company does, blah, blah, blah. It's really about how do you behave in public places where people can overhear what you're saying, and that includes sitting in a restaurant where a waiter that you think doesn't listen to things, well, I hate to tell you, they do. And in an elevator, you don't know who's in the elevator. You come out of an interview, and the first thing you say in the elevator with people is, oh, we'll never get that job. I can't believe what those questions they asked me, et cetera, et cetera. Those are kept for the privacy of your office where nobody else can hear you. So be aware of your surroundings all the time and what you're saying. Most people don't, and crazy things have happened. This is a picture of me in a few more years. I think some of you probably believe that too, don't you? Well, the point here is most Americans read 1 book a year. Now, yesterday, I heard that somebody came up to me and said that he hadn't read a book in 10 years. That's a scary thought. The main thing is when you're trying to figure out trends and how business is going and what's happening, at least once a year, you should go to a magazine shop, for instance, and pull all these different magazines off. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's knitting, wrestling, motorcycling. I don't care. Anything. Home and garden, cooking. Get a variety. Open them up. Put them down on your living room floor and take a look at them. I guarantee you, you will see trends between all of them. And the other thing I can tell you is if you learn to recognize things like that, if you're pitching to the media, or if you're returning on an RFP, you learn to respond to exactly what other people are already doing. If you went to the website, for instance, of a developer that you want work from, you'll see that people have strings of languages like your fingerprints, and they use them over and over again. If you really examine those websites, you can embed their own string of words into your proposal back to them. That will make them feel even more comfortable when they read your proposal. That brings up one more thing, which we'll talk about later, but I don't want to forget about it, and that is, I know all of you are attached to sans serif. You're all designers. You think that you have to use sans serif, but the reality is the human eye needs to be able to have those little links. It's comfortable for them. So when you're reading, you need a serif font on paper. But if you're looking at something like a PowerPoint, then on an electronic screen, you can use a sans serif font. If you are dying to use sans serif, knock yourself out. Use it as the headers. But for the base, whatever you're selling, and again, remember, we're selling, you want to use a serif font. Oh, you think you can just stay at your computer and you don't have to do any talking to real people. That's not true. You actually do have to talk to people. And again, business development is about building relationships and getting to know people. So you have to make up reasons for calling them. The best reason that I can think of is to have a party. It costs money to have a party. So let's say you invite 300 people. Out of that 300 people, maybe 50 will come. It is an expense. I do parties every year. My clients do parties every year. The best part of that expense is it gives you an excuse to call people. Hey, Al, are you going to come to the party next June? No? Oh, well, do you have any work? Those are the sorts of things you need excuses to call people. And there are lots of different ways. You know, we just finished that job for you, and we'd really like to know if it was a good experience or not. Did you like working with us? Actually, not really. This little thing here doesn't really work very well, and no one really seems to care. No kidding. Okay, well, we'll get that fixed right away. No problem. That gives you another opportunity to go fix it, be face-to-face with that person, and then ask them if they have any other future work. Are they happy with you? Would they recommend you to somebody else? So again, you have to have those interactions with real people. And introverts really do a good job of that. Now, some of you think that this slide is a little silly, but I will tell you that it's not. Active verbs, when you're responding to proposals or you're sending a pitch to the media, and again, I do an umbrella part to business development. There's marketing, public relations, business plan, going to events, being on committees. All of those are central to business development. If you're going to write a response to a proposal, it will be seen and read much better if you use an active verb. What's the difference? Okay, I've got audience out there. What about me? I can answer it. Okay. Do you know what the difference is between an active verb and a passive verb? Sure. An active verb, a passive verb is, I went to the store last week. No. Rosie, that's not passive. That's past tense. Oh, really? Really. That's the answer I get 90% of the time. So passive verbs are is, was, were. You want to stay away from those. That's the way we all sort of talk, and we sort of write that way. After you do that first draft, go back and see if you can put active verbs in. John went to the store. John skis. Those are active verbs. Oh, don't use the word unique. It's not allowed. Unique, very few things are unique. So unless it truly is unique, stay away from that. Also, stay away from universals, like always, never, must. People don't really like universals, so try to stay away from them. They'll help you in contract negotiations as well. So stories. This Frederick book is a book that I give to all my clients ahead of time, which really talks about the creative process. Why do stories? Because 70% of whatever you say inside of a story people will remember. I'm trying to see if I have a story. Time. So I already told you that I was a caterer. So I'll give you a story that I tell people on why they should do how-tos. And I'll explain that in a minute. So I'm in my kitchen, and I'm watching one of my cooks out in the kitchen stabbing an aluminum pan with a knife. I'm on the phone, and I say, I'll have to call you back. There's something in the kitchen that just doesn't seem right. And I hang up the phone. And I go out to the kitchen. I say to Judy, I'm kind of getting an idea of what's going on. And I say to her, why are you stabbing this pan? And she says, hey, isn't that the secret to your brownie recipe? I say, no. So Judy had been trained by several people, and somewhere in there, after one party I had was 5,000 people, we made 25,000 brownies. I thought I'd save some money and put the dough back in the pans, cut the brownies out, flip them out, freeze them, and make the dough in that pan. Put a little parchment paper in between the sheet pan and bake them, and only a little bit would leak out, and I could reuse the pans. But somewhere in there, it became the secret to the brownies. That's how I tell my clients why. If somebody asks me a question twice, I tell them that they have to do a how-to. So stories stick. Evergreen stories are things that you can tell your clients about things that happen, things that go wrong, things that have happened over and over again that people have heard. Like I just showed you the placemat with all the food and how to eat properly. Most of you will ignore it, but hopefully not all of you. And so an evergreen story is something that happens over and over and over again, and it just keeps getting renewed. Those stories are people's favorite stories. So you want to think about that. You also can pitch those to media. Now, I'm an old person, so I tend to do things that I remember. But you know what? You can't do that. You have to be kind of current. So you don't want to talk about things that you remembered from 30 years ago. On the other hand, if you're a young person trying to appeal to an older audience, you might want to research and be aware of things that used to happen because, again, it's not about you, it's about them. And you want to make everybody comfortable. This is one of my favorite all-time ads. Mostly because it grabs you. It gets your emotion. It gets right to your emotion. Sorry, didn't mean to click that. When you're doing a picture of a house and you want people to see that image, because you're all visual people, and you put a person in it, think about what that person is doing and how that person is going to appeal to your audience. One person will appeal to an audience. A group of people will not appeal to an audience. So that's what this is about. This one I just kind of like pictures of brains. No, there's a reason here. In this particular one, it's again about the emotions. Every story that you tell has to have some kind of an emotional appeal. It was a struggle, a challenge to get someplace, but you're the hero and you fixed it. It's a sad story. It's a happy story. All of those things, however you tell the story, it has to have emotion to it for people to really respond to you. So if you stand there like a stick and you don't have any emotion, people aren't going to listen to you. So if you're in an interview, you want to have emotion. I like this because I just like the Rolling Stones. But, well, my clients say to me, you know, that's nice, Marilynn, but we need to be an architectural record, or we need to be in Interior Design Magazine, or in the New York Times. Well, that's great. And we can do that. But for stories, for images about your company, for your branding, for all of that purpose, you need to be seen in a lot of different platforms. And that brings up one other issue. But first, let me go back to the platforms. People think that penny savers aren't worth anything. They think that the local papers aren't worth anything. But they all are. People do not remember where they saw you. So you have to be in advertising. You have to be in the penny savers. You have to sponsor events. You have to be everywhere. There was a program in Chicago a lot of years ago called Chicken Man. And I kind of have that theory about how I do this. They used to say, he's everywhere, it's Chicken Man, he's everywhere. That's really what you have to do when you're looking for publicity and you're trying to brand your firm. And branding your firm has to stay consistent so that even though you are everywhere, it has to be like Coca-Cola. You know that red circle with the white Coca-Cola? It doesn't change to pink. It doesn't change to turquoise. It stays the same. So you have to be everywhere but the same. Now, the other thing that I was going to talk about was that a lot of young people today think that there's only social media. You know, I'm on Twitter and Tumblr account, and I have a Facebook, and I have all that stuff. And I have all my clients have that, and we update their websites every 3 years, as you all should. But the buggy whip did not go out instantaneously. Horse and buggies, they were there for a while, over a period of time. So I don't want you to think that the only platform that you're going to go into is just the electronic platform. We'll talk about it with direct mail in a minute. Every story about your project, whether you're going for an interview or you're pitching it to the media or you're talking in conversation at a dinner party, you want to think from the minute you begin your project, what stories does this project have attached to it? Every project has at least 4. There's probably some community angle. There's usually a finance angle, how we did it quicker, better, faster. There's usually some technological angle to it. So as you're developing this project, you want to be aware of what the hooks are for that particular project so that then you can build your stories about it. This program was on TV a while ago, and it was about a mining town, and in one episode they had smallpox outbreak. And the editor of the paper said, you know, let's say that it's gratis. And the saloon keeper, who was always the smarter guy in the group, not always the best spoken guy, he said, no, you know what, let's say free. And he understood his audience. He had a bunch of illiterates who probably could barely read a newspaper. And if they put the word free up there, they would understand that. They would not understand gratis. So I know none of you do this. Probably none of you ever use the word fenestration or things like that in your proposals, right? You just... My experience with a lot of architects is that you tend to talk, and engineers, you tend to talk in some sort of jargon language. I'm going to ask you to have a friend interview you or somebody else that works with you, and you speak to that person. Let them take notes. Let them listen to how you talk about your projects. Because when you talk about your projects, you say free. When you write about your projects, you write gratis. So when you're responding to a proposal, you want to respond in the free language, not the gratis language. You want to make it very clear for everybody. You want to make it easy. Remember, it's not about you. And let's go back to humility. Arrogance does not sell. Humility sells. So think about that when you're doing. Now, I said earlier, you know, there are going to be some of you that are cup half empty and cup half full. I did that the wrong way. And that's very interesting that I just did that the wrong way. Your body language is very important. So if you do a body language, there's proof out there that if you do body language and you say a very happy story in a very sad way, people won't hear the happy message. But if you say a very sad story in a very happy way, people will feel very happy. So that just happened with me. I did it the wrong way. The cup half full people, you don't have to pay any attention to this. But that cup half empty people, please go out and read a very old book called The Power of Positive Thinking. Ignore the sort of religious overtones. Let it go. If you're going to be selling, you can't tell people you got stuck in traffic, the weather was bad, there isn't any work. People don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear about your problems. So you have to learn. Habits are something that you can develop. You can become happy. You can learn how to become happy. People hear happy. AT&T did a study many, many years ago where they proved that people that were listening on the other end of the telephone could hear somebody smiling. There are bazillion studies out there right now that show that when you smile, you get endorphins in your head that make you happy. Habits are formed after 40 days of practicing a habit. So practice habits of happiness. Put a mirror beside you on your desk and call people with a smile on your face. Take a look at that. Call people on happy days. Don't call people when you're not happy. I don't care. If you have a boss that says you have to call somebody today, but your house just flooded, don't listen to your boss. Don't call somebody that day. Now, the direct mail. We talked a little bit about the buggy whip going out of style, and people say, nobody does direct mail anymore. And I say, okay, if everybody stopped doing direct mail today, that'd be great. I'd still do direct mail because nobody else would, so I'd get it in the mail, and then it'd be the only piece of mail that I'd get, right? The other argument is 95% of all of the direct mail gets thrown out immediately. Okay, so what? What if out of that, all that direct mail, one tiny bit of that happens to be one giant project that you get? Then is it worth it? My experience with all my clients is, and my own business, I have always been repaid for doing direct mail. You've got to do it well. You can't do the sort of used car salesman postcard where you try to cram everything in there that you possibly can. I mean, no, it's got to be done well. So direct mail, you know, the other thing is that it's hurting the environment. That's maybe, that might be partially true. On the other hand, I'd still do it. Community service. Even if you're a tiny organization, and I know that most of the sole proprietors that belong to AIA are smaller organizations. But all of you should try to align yourself with some community service that equates to your business. This particular one was a client of mine that did the Hoover building in Washington, D.C., and I was down in Key West and saw that this building, the Harry S. Truman building museum was in very bad shape. The rugs were horrible. They needed help. And I came back to my client and I said, look, I know they're in Florida, but we've got a link here. You did the Harry S. Truman building in D.C. These guys need help. Why don't we help them? And we did, and it was a huge success. Another client wanted to be seen more as a design architect firm, so we aligned ourselves with the Washington Project for the Arts and do a huge party every year. Over the last 4 or 5 years, when there was a giant recession, as some of you recall, hopefully we're coming out of it. I've heard from this convention that things are happier. We raised $100,000 in 3 hours. We got 750 people to the party. It's like the biggest, coolest party in D.C. Yes, it's an expense. I'm hearing some of you saying, we don't have money to do that. There are all sorts of ways to do community service projects that you don't have to use a bundle of cash. You just have to figure out what they are and how to do it. Anytime you help people, people are going to want to do business with you because, again, it goes back to that emotion of what kind of a person are you? Client gifts. Well, we can't afford to do client gifts. Well, if we give client gifts, people will think we're bribing them. If we give client gifts, our employees will wonder why we're doing that instead of their bonus. People won't pay attention to client gifts. Okay, those are the negative people. Oh, I love that puzzle that you did a few years ago for that client. Yeah, puzzles sell. When I do client gifts, I try to think of things that can go back to the family. So a lot of times people say, well, I'd rather have a paperweight with our logo inside of it. Boring, boring. You don't want boring. You want something exciting for people. You want something that they're going to take to their beach house, like a telescope or a giant puzzle or a pop-up book. Something that they can share with their family. Client gifts are remembered. And you want to celebrate the clients that have really been giving you good business, or clients that you think might give you good business, or editors of newspapers or magazines. They like gifts too. In this particular instance, this is a blunt umbrella that we did for Hickok Cole's anniversary party, their 25th anniversary party, and we didn't want to do, I don't like those normal campaigns for 25th anniversaries where they're all, silver lame and stuff like that. Nah. So I developed a concept for them of go forward, going strong. And the blunt umbrella is a very strong umbrella. It's architectural, the way that it's built. It was a good thing. So we took a picture of everybody in the firm, like you can see. And the response was just amazing. Amazing. People called us up. Plus, we see all these red umbrellas all around D.C. You'd be surprised. We developed 300 of them. So remember what I said at the beginning? There's the beginning, which is ethics. You can't have a good business unless you're honest, dependable. You show up on time, sometimes ahead of time. And you can't do business without appreciation. You can do all the how-tos in the middle, but if you don't have these two things at each end, you're not going to have good business, okay? This book is a very small book. I advise you to read it, but you don't have to. Main thing you have to do is write a handwritten thank you note. What about emails? No, Rosie, no emails. Handwritten. I don't know. I don't have very good penmanship. What would I say? Why can't I just send an email? Oh. So we're just totally ignoring Rosie now for the rest of the time. Handwritten thank you notes, that's how I made my business. They're remembered. And I'm going to give you an example. Cindy Allen, who's the editor-in-chief of Interior Design magazine, has a whole wall, and it's all thank you notes. And the first time I went in there, I went, hey, there's my thank you note. And she said, yes. And for the 25 years that I've been doing business, those are all the thank you notes that I've gotten. So what does that tell you? It says that most people don't send thank you notes and don't say that they're appreciative of the work. I send thank you notes to everybody. It doesn't matter whether they're clients, somebody that I've just met, somebody that does me some kind of a favor. So please send people thank you notes, send handwritten thank you notes. It's kind of like the buggy whip thing. People rarely get thank you notes People send me thank you notes for the thank you notes that I've sent them. They send my clients thank you notes. And I cannot think of another thing that's more important than being appreciative for whatever you're doing.
That's all, folks.
So that's the end, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you need any kind of information, I'm happy to help. You can reach me through the AIA or whatever. And thank you for doing this, and I hope it helps you in your business development.